Adolf Hitler's favourite residence during World War II was the Berghof, a house he had had built for himself on the Obersalzberg in southern Germany. The Obersalzberg stood above the small town of Berchtesgaden in the Bavarian Alps. Hitler's house, the Berghof, was lavishly decorated and was an important diplomatic centre before the war and later used as a military command headquarters alongside the Wolfslair in East Prussia and the Reich Chancellery in Berlin. It was also the one place where Hitler could truly relax and lead a relatively normal home life with Eva Braun. Perhaps most famously of all, it was home to the Eagle's Nest, a tea house situated high up on Kelstein Mountain, high above the Obersalzberg and even higher above Berchtesgaden. By late April 1945, Hitler was long gone, but Allied armies were fast approaching the Eagle's Nest and the Obersalzberg. The only question was, who would reach it first, the French or the Americans? 25th of April 1945, a massive Royal Air Force air raid leaves the Obersalzberg devastated. Locals loot many of the shattered buildings. Hitler's home, the Berghof, is extensively damaged, along with most of the other major Nazi Party buildings. This air raid took place in order to deny Hitler the use of the Obersalzberg as an emergency headquarters to defend the remaining rump of the Third Reich in the Alpine regions, should he have chosen to flee from the Führerbunker in Berlin. By early May 1945, the French 2nd Armoured Division and the US 3rd Infantry Division were closing in on Berchtesgaden, the main town below the Obersalzberg, on parallel routes. Allied soldiers knew that if their unit captured Hitler's mountain hideaway, they would enjoy everlasting fame. One of the units of the US 3rd Infantry Division is the 7th Infantry Regiment. It has fought from North Africa into Germany, from Sicily, Anzio, southern France, the Vosges Mountains and the Colmar Pocket. On the 2nd of May 1945, the unit moved on from Munich and liberated Dachau concentration camp. Pushing now into Austria, the unit captured Salzburg without opposition. They were surprised by the lack of resistance after the hard fight across Germany. Major General John Iron Mike O'Daniel, commanding the 3rd Infantry Division, realized that his unit was close to Berchtesgaden. He proposed a quick dash to take the place. The problem was, Berchtesgaden and the Obersalzberg had already been placed into the operational areas of the French 2nd Armoured Division and the US 101st Airborne. General Eisenhower had expected the 3rd Infantry to become bogged down in fighting for Salzburg, which hadn't happened. The 7th Infantry Regiment controlled the 2 remaining intact bridges over the Saarlach River, the only way to approach Berchtesgaden. General O'Daniel requested he strike, but permission was denied. In the early morning hours of the 4th of May, O'Daniel decided to disobey orders. At 1000 hours, O'Daniel briefed Colonel John A. Heintges, the commanding officer of the 7th Infantry Regiment. Heintges was ordered to assemble a task force that would race for Berchtesgaden and the Obersalzberg. In the meantime, O'Daniel's engineers blocked off the bridges, refusing to allow any other American or French units to cross for safety reasons. Iron Mike O'Daniel was determined that Hitler's home would fall to his division. The 1st and 3rd Battalions, 7th Infantry Regiment moved out. The 1st Battalion was led by a Battle Patrol reconnaissance unit, which hurried west on a direct route via Bad Reichenhall. German forces in the Alpine towns scattered or surrendered almost immediately to US forces. The 3rd Battalion drove east on the Autobahn, heading also for Berchtesgaden. Beyond Bad Reichenhall, the Special Battle Patrol ran into an SS unit that was holding a mountain pass. They placed the US under artillery fire. The US forces reorganized themselves and counterattacked. The die-hard SS unit was either killed or scattered. In the meantime, the 3rd Battalion was racing down the Autobahn. and had covered over 10 miles in 1 hour and were halfway to Berchtesgaden. The last organized defense before Berchtesgaden was a single German armored car which attempted to stop the Americans and was knocked out. Forces from the 1st and 3rd Battalions began to approach Berchtesgaden. A local German commander came out to meet them and negotiate the surrender of himself and his 2,000 men. American forces now entered and liberated Berchtesgaden and began setting up all-round defense and a headquarters in the town. One of the characters they encountered was Hermann Göring's nephew Fritz, who identified himself to Colonel Heintges. Fritz Göring led American soldiers to where a large cache of looted art stolen by Göring was hidden. American eyes now turned to the Obersalzberg towering above Berchtesgaden in the mountains. Lieutenant Sherman Pratt took a platoon and some tanks and started up the winding mountain road. The visibility was excellent and the road was clear of German forces. Each time they glanced up, they could see, high above them, the eagle's nest. But Pratt and his men were disappointed by what they found, a moonscape of shattered, burned-out buildings and bomb craters. Pratt and his men didn't hang around for long. After a bit of light looting, they decided to drive back down to Berchtesgaden and report what they'd found. Before leaving the scene, one of the officers hauled down the swastika flag that was still flying from outside the burning Berghof and took it with them as a souvenir. Back in Berchtesgaden, Colonel Heintges took the flag and ordered it cut into pieces and given out to his officers as trophies. By late evening on the 4th of May, the 1st French troops of the 2nd Armored Division had reached Berchtesgaden, and the next morning on the 5th of May, the first men of the 101st Airborne Division also made it. Early on the 5th of May, Colonel Heintges and the French agreed to divide Berchtesgaden into mutual occupation zones, with the railway tracks running through the town being the dividing line. The French were given the area that included the Obersalzberg. Later, Colonel Heintges apparently changed his mind. He decided to go back to the Berghof, now in the French zone, and raise the American flag. In the meantime, a small French task force of 40 men in half-tracks with 2 Sherman tanks started to climb up towards the Obersalzberg. On arrival, they encountered the Berghof Hotel, which had been damaged during the British bombing. However, inside, the building was largely intact, with tables still set for lunch. French troops found an extensive cellar full of wine, which they liberated with alacrity. Then they moved on to the Berghof, which was largely a smouldering shell devoid of furniture and art. Then they established a firm roadblock at the old SS gatehouse that guarded the entrance to the Berghof. A little while later, a joint flag-raising ceremony was held outside the Berghof with the departing US 7th Infantry Regiment. But who captured the Eagle's Nest? Reputedly, members of the US 7th Infantry had gone as far as the lift below the building, but no evidence exists that any climbed all the way to the top. Members of the famous 506th Parachute Infantry Regiment, part of the US 101st Airborne, claimed that they were the first up shortly after arriving in the area, but no conclusive proof of their claim has ever been found. However, it is known that elements of the French 2nd Armored Division were present, and a group of French and Spanish soldiers claimed to have climbed all the way up through the snow on the night of the 4th or 5th of May to be the first Allied soldiers to stand in Hitler's fabled Eagle's Nest. Unfortunately, we shall probably never know the truth.